4,000 people.
Yeah.
I really just want to start right there today. Because in the tech industry, we have this terrible tendency to turn human beings into arithmetic.
We do. We absolutely do.
We see a headline, we see a percentage sign, maybe a little red arrow pointing down on a chart, and we just move on to check the stock price.
Yeah.
But 4,000 people, that is the population of a decent-sized town.
It is.
Imagine walking down Main Street, and literally every single person you pass, the shopkeeper, the delivery driver, the person walking their dog, every single one of them just lost their livelihood in a single afternoon.
It is a genuinely staggering number. And usually when we see a headcount reduction of that magnitude, I mean, we're talking nearly 40% of a company here, it is attached to a firm that is just visibly, undeniably failing.
Right.
You know the type. A company that is just hemorrhaging cash, or one that just lost its primary revenue stream overnight. It's usually a panic move.
The classic throw the cargo overboard to save the sinking ship maneuver. But that isn't what happened today. We're talking about Block Inc., Jack Dorsey's empire.
Yeah.
The company formerly known as Square. They aren't bankrupt. In fact, as we'll see a bit later when we look at the numbers, they are actually quite profitable.
Very profitable.
Yet here we are, on February 27th, 2026. They confirmed they are cutting nearly half their staff.
And that right there is why this particular deep dive is so critical for us to do today. Because if this were just a story about a failing company, we could basically ignore it. We could chalk it up to bad management and move on.
Yeah, it's just another cautionary tale.
Right. But this is being framed as a structural mutation. That is the exact phrase Dorsey is using in the internal documents. Structural mutation. He is not saying, hey guys, we are broke. He is saying the fundamental way we have built companies for the last 100 years is now completely obsolete.
He's calling it the dawn of the intelligence organization. And honestly, reading through all the source material we gathered for this deep dive, we've got Dorsey's internal memos, the detailed financial audits, and this really dense, fascinating analysis from the netizen regarding what they call the 9 shifts. It feels less like a corporate restructuring and more like a prophecy.
Or a warning shot.
Yes,
Yeah.
a massive warning shot for literally every knowledge worker in the global economy. Yeah. If you are listening to this right now and you work at a computer, this matters to you.
It absolutely does. The core question we have to answer today isn't just about Block's stock ticker, it's much bigger. We have to figure out, is Jack Dorsey a visionary who is seeing the future of work before anyone else? Is he evolving Block into this entirely new species of company where AI effectively replaces the need for human density? Or is this a massive failure of imagination? Did leadership simply run out of big ideas and decide to just shrink their way to profitability because they couldn't figure out how to grow?
And we have a ton of ground to cover to answer that. We are going to break down those 9 shifts that define this new intelligence organization, which, by the way, is going to sound terrifyingly familiar to a lot of you. Then we'll audit Block's actual financials to see if the math even supports this move. And finally, we're going to present the counter-argument from the sources.
The up pivot.
The up pivot. This idea that Dorsey could have used those 4,000 people to build a global financial operating system instead of just firing them.
I have to say, the up pivot is probably the most fascinating part of the research for me. It completely challenges that Silicon Valley premise that smaller is always better. It asks a really hard question: why couldn't better have meant bigger and more capable?
Exactly. But let's get into the scripture first. That is what the analysts are calling Dorsey's internal memos. So February 27th, the axe falls. What is the specific justification here? Because usually the CEO gets on a Zoom call, looks appropriately sad, and blames interest rates or, macroeconomic headwinds.
Yeah, the standard playbook. But Dorsey didn't do that. He went surprisingly philosophical. He explicitly cited an age of abundance. The rationale for firing 4,000 people is linked directly to, quote, intelligence tools, which is really just 2026 speak for advanced AI agents paired with smaller and flatter teams.
Smaller and flatter. I mean, every management consultant since the late 90s has preached the gospel of flat organizations. Why is this any different?
Because previously, flat was just an aspirational culture thing. It meant, let's have fewer pointless meetings, or my door is always open, come talk to me.
Right, casual Fridays and an open floor plan.
Exactly. But it rarely actually worked in practice because the physics of information just didn't allow it. Dorsey is arguing that flat is no longer a cultural choice. It is a technological necessity. He says this combination of AI and small teams enables a new way of working which fundamentally changes what it means to build and run a company. He essentially believes the industrial era corporation is dead.
Okay, I want to define that term really clearly for you listening before we move on. Industrial era corporation. Because we aren't talking about smokestacks and assembly lines here, right? We are talking about the actual organizational chart.
We're talking about the pyramid. Think about how scaling has worked since Henry Ford, or honestly, even since the Roman legions. If you wanted to produce twice as many cars, you needed twice as many workers on the line. If you wanted to process twice as many insurance claims, you had to hire twice as many adjusters.
Linear scaling.
Yeah.
Input equals output. To get more out of the machine, you have to shovel more bodies into the furnace.
Precisely. And because you had thousands of people, you needed layers of control. You can't just have a mob of thousands of workers. You need an army. So the workers do the actual work. The managers watch the workers. The directors watch the managers. The VPs watch the directors.
Right.
It was a structure completely designed for control and compliance. It was designed to prevent human error at scale.
And in that world, your status, your literal worth to the company, was defined by your headcount. I remember in my early corporate days, the very first question at any networking event was, how big is your team?
Oh, absolutely. I managed 50 people. That was the ultimate flex. That was the scorecard. In the industrial model, headcount equated directly to power, but it also meant information moved at an incredibly glacial pace. We call it the telephone game. A frontline customer service rep finds a critical bug in the software. They tell their manager. The manager summarizes it for the director. The director puts it in a bullet point on a slide deck for the VP.
And by the time that information finally hits the CEO's desk, it has been sanitized, spun to make everyone look good, and it is 3 weeks late. The problem has probably metastasized by then.
Exactly. And Dorsey is arguing that the intelligence model completely obliterates that physics. In an intelligence organization, the bottleneck isn't labor hours anymore. It isn't how many hands you have furiously typing on a keyboard. The bottleneck shifts entirely to judgment and direction.
Because the AI provides the hands now.
The AI writes the code. The AI drafts the 80-page legal contract. The AI answers the customer's nuanced question. So you simply don't need that massive layer of doers anymore, and consequently, you don't need the massive layer of watchers who manage the doers. You really just need the directors.
This leads us directly into the netizen analysis from our sources. The material outlines 9 specific shifts that mark this painful transition from the industrial to the intelligence era. I want to go through these methodically because, for anyone listening, this is effectively a checklist. You need to look at your own employer right now and ask yourself, are we mutating or are we dying?
It really is a survival guide. It's a rubric for what the next 10 years of work is going to look like.
Let's start with shift number 1, from headcount to leverage. This seems to be the foundational economic argument for everything Block is doing.
It is the bedrock. Let's look back at the old world, say the year 2005. If a startup wanted to build a global software platform, run a complex financial model, and operate a 24/7 customer support line, they needed 50 people minimum just to get out of bed. You needed a back-end team to manage the physical servers, a front-end team for the website, a DevOps guy, a CFO, a whole room full of people for the call center.
A crowded office, lots of free snacks, and a massive burn rate.
Right. Today, the source analysis argues that a 5-person team can entirely match the output of that 2000-era 50-person team. But here's the catchway. It fundamentally changes what those 5 people actually do all day. They aren't specialist cogs in a machine anymore. The team becomes a control center.
A control center. That specific phrasing implies they aren't really doing the raw work anymore. They're monitoring the work being done.
Exactly. The AI runs the Monte Carlo financial simulations. The AI handles the support chat with near-human fluency in 20 languages. The AI writes all the boilerplate back-end code. The human beings are just there for taste, strategy, and moral decisions.
Taste. That is a really subjective word to use in a hard business analysis. Usually we talk about KPIs or OKRs, not taste.
But it is probably the most important word in this new era. Look, when the cost of generating content or writing code drops essentially to 0, the value of curating that output goes to infinity. If an AI can give you 100 logo variations or 50 different marketing slogans in 10 seconds flat, you don't need a graphic designer to physically draw them anymore. You need a creative director with the taste to look at that massive pile of output and say, that one. That is the one that connects with our human audience.
Right.
The human doesn't paint the picture anymore. The human decides if the picture is ugly or not. They become the editor-in-chief of the AI's infinite output.
Which brings us to shift number 2, And this is the one that makes me sweat a little bit, and I imagine a lot of our listeners might feel a sudden chill here too. The collapse of middle management. We've heard about flattening before, as we said, but the source says the informational advantage of the manager is just gone. What does that actually mean on the ground?
Think about what a middle manager actually does all day in a standard Fortune 500 company. They attend meetings to gather information from the ground floor, and then they hold other meetings to distribute that information up the chain. They are human routers. They only exist because the CEO cannot physically talk to 1,000 engineers every morning to find out if a project is on schedule.
They are the glue. They translate executive speak into engineer speak and vice versa.
But in an intelligence organization, the glue is software. We have real-time dashboards, automated sentiment reporting, and AI agents that can query the entire company database instantly. If Jack Dorsey wakes up and wants to know exactly how Cash App performed in Brazil yesterday, or what the top 3 most nuanced user complaints are regarding the new interface update, he doesn't need to email the regional VP of Brazil and wait 2 days for a polished PowerPoint deck. He just asks the data agent.
So the entire router function is obsolete. The CEO has direct, unfiltered access to the ground truth at all times.
It's evaporated. The source notes that this completely redefines leadership. Managers have to stop supervising activity like, did you clock in on time or did you file the TPS report? And they have to start designing systems. You stop being a babysitter and you have to start being an architect.
That is a massive skill gap, though.
Yep.
Moving from people management, which is all about soft skills, empathy, conflict resolution, organization, to systems architecture, which is logic, optimization, technical understanding. That is not a small pivot. That is an entirely different career.
Which is exactly why we are seeing these massive layoffs. Many of the people being let go at Block aren't bad at their jobs. Their performance reviews were probably fine. Their jobs just fundamentally don't exist in the new physics of the company. You can be the absolute best horse and buggy driver in the world, but when the Model T rolls out, your specific skill set is no longer the bottleneck for transportation.
Wow. Okay, shift number 3. From process to iteration speed. This really touches on the military concept of the OOD loop: observe, orient, decide, act.
Speed of learning is the new ultimate competitive advantage. In the old industrial model, the cost of experimentation was incredibly high. Think about it. If you wanted to launch a new feature at a legacy bank, you had to spec it out, go through a massive compliance review, design it, code it, test it, figure out the marketing. It took weeks, sometimes months, of cross-departmental coordination.
And if it failed after all that, you just wasted a month of payroll and you have egg on your face in front of the board. So naturally, the culture becomes highly risk-averse. You only build things you already know will work.
Right. But now, you have a crazy idea in the morning while drinking your coffee. You prompt the AI to build a working prototype by lunch. You test it against a synthetic user base or a very small live cohort in the afternoon. You get data back by dinner. You launch version 2 the next morning. The cost of failure drops to near zero.
So the winner in this new market isn't the company with the deepest pockets, the one who can afford to absorb the most massive failures. It's simply the company that can fail the fastest.
Exactly. Speed of iteration beats depth of resources every single time. If I can try 10 distinct ideas in the exact same time it takes you to try just one, I will eventually beat you, even if you are significantly smarter than me. Evolution works on iteration, not raw intelligence.
That brings us to shift number 4. And this shift creates an entirely new type of employee archetype. The source calls it the rise of the operator architect, or the orchestrator.
This is the death of the stay-in-your-lane corporate culture. The old model was highly, highly siloed. You are in marketing. You do not touch the code. You are in finance. You do not touch the creative assets. You are an engineer. You definitely do not talk to the customers.
Because realistically, you didn't have the skills to cross over. The marketing guy doesn't know Python. The back-end engineer doesn't know how to run a profitable Facebook ad campaign or balance a ledger.
But now he doesn't actually need to know Python. He just needs to know how to direct the AI to write the Python. The silos are completely collapsing because the technical barrier to entry for these skills is collapsing. The orchestrator is a single person who writes the product specs, generates the UI mockups using an image model, builds the MVP code using a coding agent, and runs the A/B ad tests using a marketing agent all simultaneously.
One person doing the job of 5 distinct departments. I mean, that sounds incredibly empowering on one hand, but also, isn't it exhausting? Are we just going to burn people out exponentially faster?
It is high agency, but it is extremely high pressure. You can't hide behind excuses like, oh, I'm waiting on the dev team anymore. You are the dev team. It requires a true polymath mindset. You don't need to be a world-class expert in everything, but you need to be competent enough in everything to know if the AI is doing a good job or just hallucinating garbage.
Shift 5 is capital efficiency as strategy. This is the money talk. This is why the board of directors ultimately signs off on firing 4,000 people.
This is exactly why Wall Street is cautiously drooling over this model. Historically, a tech startup raised a Series A or a Series B round for one primary reason: to hire people. 70% or more of the burn rate was just payroll. That was the established formula: raise money, hire bodies, show growth. Now, the capital allocation is entirely shifting from hiring humans to renting compute power.
The source material mentions a specific benchmark here that honestly blew my mind when I read it. A startup reaching $10 million in annual recurring revenue ARR with only 8 employees.
That used to be literally impossible. 10 million ARR was a 100-person company a decade ago. Now it's quickly becoming the standard baseline for the new wave of AI-native companies. And Jack Dorsey is sitting there looking at those margins, which are almost pure software margins, incredibly high, and then he's looking at his own 10,000-person headcount, and the math just doesn't look good to him anymore. He realizes he's going to be competing against these lean 8-person destroyers.
Shift 6. Asymmetry between individuals and institutions. This is the David versus Goliath point.
It is the realization that companies are no longer fortresses of manpower. They are networks of augmented individuals. If you have 4,000 people who are just blindly following orders and passing memos around, they're actually a massive liability now. They slow you down, they create organizational drag, they create endless meetings. But a single, highly motivated founder with the right AI stack can completely outmaneuver them. We are entering an era where one person in a garage can legitimately challenge a legacy institution.
Shift 7 is about culture. Culture becomes more important. And I have to admit, this one seems counterintuitive to me at first glance. If we're all just sitting around prompting robots, why do the human vibes matter at all? I would think culture matters way less if the machine is doing all the heavy lifting.
But you have to remember, the teams are so much smaller now. In a massive bureaucracy of 50,000 people, a low performer can coast for years. They can blend right in. They can just be net neutral. But in a hyper-lean 10-person team that is running a billion-dollar platform, if even one person is off their game, the whole system breaks down.
Trust becomes the ultimate currency.
Exactly. The source notes that a 10-person team operating at this scale must function almost like a single brain. It's like a Navy SEAL team instead of cruise ship crew. You can't have petty office politics when you are moving that fast. You can't have passive-aggressive email chains. The interpersonal friction has to be absolutely zero.
Shift 8, the acceleration factor. This is where the fear component really kicks in.
Dorsey specifically noted in his memo, quote, "and that's accelerating rapidly." AI capabilities aren't static like old software. They are compounding. The massive risk of waiting to restructure of a CEO saying, let's just see how this plays out for a year before we do layoffs, is that you end up competing against a team that is suddenly 10 times more efficient than you. By the time you realize you are hopelessly behind, it is mathematically impossible to catch up because they are accelerating away from you.
And finally, Shift 9, the fundamental change, moving fully from industrial to intelligence.
It really is the summary of everything we just discussed. The foundational shift from scaling an enterprise via labor to scaling it via software and models.
So if you accept these 9 shifts as gospel, Jack Dorsey is a genius. He is the ruthless but necessary surgeon cutting out the cancer to save the patient. He is seeing the iceberg miles before the ship hits it. But we have to look at the patient on the table. We have to look at Block itself. Because abstract theory is one thing, but the messy reality of a publicly traded company is another.
And Block is a very complicated patient with a lot of history.
Let's look at the boring truth for a second, the actual financials. Block isn't a nimble little startup. It was founded way back in 2009. It has a lot of legacy baggage.
And remember, they started with such a pure, clear mission. The Square Reader. That iconic little white dongle you plugged into an iPhone, it democratized payments. It was truly revolutionary at the time. Suddenly, the local taco truck or the farmer's market vendor could take a Visa card. Then they added Cash App, which became an absolute cultural phenomenon for peer-to-peer money.
But then came what the analysts call the empire-building phase. They bought Tidal Jay-Z's music streaming service, which confused everyone. They bought Afterpay for $29 billion right at the peak of the market. They went super heavy into Bitcoin infrastructure.
They tried to be everything to everyone. And in 2025, The numbers really show the result of that massive sprawl. Now, don't get me wrong, they make money. Gross profit was around $10.36 billion. Growth was decent too, around 17 to 24% year over year, depending on the quarter. Cash App specifically is still booming, growing at 51% in Q4 of 2025.
Those sound like winning numbers. I mean, if I told you a company was pulling in $10 billion, growing at 20%, you'd probably buy the stock immediately. Why has the stock been so volatile? Why was it down 29% at times in 2025?
Because of something Wall Street calls the mid-teens trap.
Okay, explain that to me.
Investors broadly categorize companies into two main buckets: growth and value. A growth company like a hot new startup or Nvidia right now, they might burn money or reinvest absolutely everything they make, but they are growing at 50, 80, 100% a year. Investors will gladly pay a massive premium for that dream of future dominance. On the other hand, a value company, think Coca-Cola, or a utility company, grows very slowly, maybe 10%, but it spits out massive, predictable profits and dividends.
And Block, where do they fit?
Block is stuck right in the middle. Mid-teens growth is absolute purgatory for a tech firm. They aren't growing quite fast enough to be valued as a rocket ship, but they were spending way too much money on headcount and wild projects to be a reliable profit machine. So Wall Street looked at them and basically said, look, you are a mature company now. Act like one. Cut your costs. Give us better margins.
So the cynic's view would be that Dorsey isn't actually building an intelligence organization at all. He isn't a philosopher king seeing the future. He is just capitulating to Wall Street pressure. He is firing 4,000 people simply to move the numbers from column A to column B so the stock price goes up next quarter.
And that perspective leads perfectly into the failed-up pivot theory. This is the most critical part of the analysis we are doing today. The massive counterargument to the layoffs.
The up pivot. I absolutely love this concept. The source material asks such a brutal, piercing question. Instead of firing 4,000 people just to save money on the balance sheet, why didn't Block use those exact same 4,000 people to do something 10 times bigger?
It is what the author calls the imagination constraint. The core argument is that Block already had the top-tier talent in the building to position itself not just as a collection of disjointed fintech apps, but as the global financial operating system.
That sounds like an incredible buzzword salad. Global financial OS.
Yeah.
Make that concrete for me. What does that actually look like in the real world if they had built it?
The source outlines 4 specific pillars of what this could have been if they hadn't frunk. Pillar 1 is embedded finance at planetary scale.
Okay, unpack that for the listener.
Right now, if you are a massive platform like Uber or DoorDash or Shopify or even a brand new neobank launching in Nigeria, you have to painfully stitch together your payments, your lending, and your payroll from a dozen different providers. It is incredibly messy. You use one API for processing credit cards, a totally different one for bank transfers, another one for issuing physical debit cards to your drivers. Block could have become the AWS of money, the invisible unified plumbing that runs the entire internet economy.
So they wouldn't just be providing the card reader for the taco truck anymore. They'd be the hidden infrastructure powering Uber's entire financial backend.
Exactly. Wholesale power, providing the clean rails for everyone else to build on top of. But doing that requires massive, sustained engineering resources. You have to integrate with bespoke banking systems in 100 different countries. You have to deal with endless legacy code that might take, I don't know, say 4,000 engineers to pull off.
Wow. Okay. Pillar 2, AI native financial intelligence.
This is the shift from just processing dumb transactions to actually selling a brain. Imagine if Square didn't just take a 3% cut of a payment, but it automatically handled the merchant's entire tax burden, their daily accounting, and their local compliance without a human ever touching it.
Like having an expert CFO in a box for $50 a month.
Better than a CFO. Imagine predictive cash flow lending. The AI analyzes the local coffee shop's sales velocity in real time, cross-references it with local weather data and supply chain costs, and says, hey, based on your trend line, you are going to run out of cash in exactly 12 days because you ordered too much inventory. Here's a $5,000 bridge loan already approved. Click this button to accept the funds right now.
That is incredible value for a small business owner. And strategically, it makes the product incredibly sticky. You can't ever lease Block if their software is literally predicting your survival.
Right. Now, pillar 3, a global SMB banking network. Block is huge in the US, obviously, but there are billions of underbanked merchants in the emerging world across Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America.
The source specifically mentions disrupting SWIFT here.
SWIFT is the incredibly old, incredibly slow way that money currently moves across international borders. It takes days, it requires correspondent banks, and it costs a fortune in fees. Block, using their Bitcoin rails and their own massive network, could have theoretically built a real-time global payment corridor. A small merchant in Lagos paying a supplier in Shenzhen instantly on a Sunday, with Block taking a tiny fraction of a cent.
That is a trillion-dollar opportunity. But again, to your point, it requires real boots on the ground. It requires navigating compliance officers and regulators in 50 different sovereign nations. You absolutely can't do that with just a handful of AI agents. You need a massive team of people.
And finally, Pillar 4, Bitcoin and programmable finance. Not just buying Bitcoin to hold on the balance sheet, but actually building the complex developer tools to make crypto genuinely usable for daily commerce, instead of just treating it like a speculative casino.
So the core argument here is that these 4 pillars represent a true 10x ambition. If Jack Dorsey had walked into the boardroom and said, "We are doing this, we are becoming the OS for global finance," he would have needed every single one of those 4,000 people he just fired.
And if they succeeded in building even half of that, their growth wouldn't be stuck in the mid-teens. It would be 40 or 50% year over year. And as we know, when you grow that fast, nobody on Wall Street asks you to fire people. Nobody taps NVIDIA on the shoulder right now and tells them to trim the fat.
So why didn't he do it? Why actively choose the pain of mass layoffs over the challenge of massive expansion?
This brings us to the tragedy of the strategic crossroads. We really have to talk about leverage and narrative courage.
Narrative courage.
Yes. Think about the power dynamics. It is infinitely easier for Jack Dorsey, who is already a billionaire founder with unimpeachable tech credentials, to just raise fresh capital for a massive new vision someday than it is for a laid-off mid-level engineer to find a new job in a terrible market. Dorsey could have gone to the board and used his leverage. He could have said, "Trust me on this. We are betting the entire farm on the global financial OS. It will be incredibly expensive. Our profit margins will definitely drop for 2 years. But when we emerge, we will own the world."
But he didn't do that.
He didn't. He chose contraction. And contraction is safe. It is the known playbook. It pleases the activist investors today. It instantly boosts the stock price tomorrow. Expansion. Expansion is terrifying. It is incredibly risky. You might actually fail and look foolish.
And it sends a massive psychological signal to the market and the talent pool. Layoffs scream, "We are defending our territory. We are retreating. We are optimizing." Expansion screams, "We are inventing the future, and we are conquering."
And here's the really insidious thing about top-tier talent. The absolute best engineers, those orchestrators we talked about earlier, they don't want to work for a company that is just trying to optimize its margins by a few basis points. They want to work on the rocket ship. By choosing contraction over ambition, Dorsey might have inadvertently repelled the exact 10x talent he claims he wants to keep for his intelligence organization. Because honestly, who wants to be the last genius left on a sinking ship?
It brings us directly to the paradox of AI. And I think this is the specific thought I really want you listening to sit with today.
The paradox is so simple, but it completely breaks the current corporate narrative. Dorsey and CEOs like him are arguing AI allows us to do the exact same amount of work with way fewer people.
The standard baseline efficiency argument, cost savings.
But the powerful counterargument is AI allows those exact same people to do 10 times more work.
Right. If I hire a guy to dig a hole, and then I invent a steam shovel and give it to him, I don't fire him because he can dig the hole faster.
Right.
I tell him to go dig a much bigger hole. I tell him to dig a canal.
Exactly. Why is the corporate goal suddenly same output, fewer humans? Why isn't the goal same humans, massive, world-changing output?
The answer, according to our expert source material, is that imagination constraint.
The real bottleneck in the tire industry today isn't technology. It isn't access to capital. It isn't even the cost of labor. It is the fundamental ability of executive leadership to dream up enough highly valuable work for 4,000 superpowered AI-augmented employees to actually do. Block's leadership looked at these incredible new AI tools, looked at their 4,000 people, and effectively threw their hands up and admitted, "We just don't know what to do with you all anymore."
That is just... It's incredibly damning when you phrase it like that.
It implies they ran out of visionary ideas long before they ever ran out of money.
So, synthesizing all of this, we really have 2 distinct competing views of reality here. View number 1, Jack Dorsey, is the cold, unsentimental futurist. He sees the massive AI tsunami coming before the rest of us. He knows the industrial era corporation is a bloated dinosaur, and he is painfully but necessarily evolving block into a lean, mean intelligence organization just to survive the next decade.
That is the charitable view. And frankly, looking closely at the mechanics of those 9 shifts we discussed, he might be entirely right about the structural mechanism.
But then there is view number 2. Block is just a stalled giant. They got trapped in the mid-teens growth cycle, they completely ran out of big visionary ideas, and they're using the vague promise of AI as highly convenient cover story to slash costs and plump their stock price for the board.
The failed-up pivot.
Which one do you actually believe?
The terrifying part. I think both can be completely true at the exact same time. Dorsey might be absolutely right about the structure of the intelligence org might truly be the inevitable future form of the firm. But he might be totally wrong about the ambition. He essentially built a Ferrari, but he is only using it to drive to the grocery store at 20 miles an hour.
Let's zoom out for a minute as we wrap up, because most of you listening right now aren't Jack Dorsey. You don't have $1 billion and a board of directors. You are the people sitting in those office chairs.
And this episode is your warning shot.
If the netizen analysis is even halfway right, the era of the middle manager, the person who just aggregates info and passes along that era, is over. If that describes your daily job, you are standing directly in the blast zone.
You are the dinosaur looking up at the sky. The meteor is already in the atmosphere.
But on the flip side, if you can become that operator architect we talked about, if you can learn to wield these AI tools to do the work of 5 people,
then you become the new power center. You become the augmented individual. You become invaluable.
So the real lesson here isn't about Block's stock price. It's don't wait for your CEO to suddenly develop imagination. You have to have the imagination for your own career path.
Precisely. You have to become the orchestrator. Because the very definition of what a company is being rewritten in real time right now, and you need to ensure you are part of the new definition, not the old one that gets cut.
I want to leave you with a final provocation to chew on. In a world where AI is rapidly giving us almost godlike powers of production, where a single person can do 100 times what they could do just yesterday, why are our collective ambitions shrinking? Why are we using this miraculous power just to marginally improve quarterly profits instead of using it to build cathedrals?
Are we building the actual future, or are we just optimizing the brick factory so we can fire half the workers?
Think about your own company right now. Ask yourself, are you building an intelligence organization, or are you really just shrinking an industrial one?
That is the only question that matters.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep looking ahead, and we'll see you in the future.
Take care, everyone.